Here's a detailed summary of receipts written in simple and clear language. Capital receipts, detailed summary, simplified. 1. What are capital receipts? Capital receipts are the money that the government receives, but not from its regular income like taxes or fees. These are non-revenue receipts, meaning they are not earned regularly. Instead, they come in as big amounts, one time or irregularly, and are usually meant for important development works, like roads, railways, hospitals, schools, etc. 2. Why are they called capital receipts? Because they are usually used for capital investment. That means building or creating things that last for a long time and help the country grow. These are different from revenue receipts, which are used for daily running expenses of the government. 3. Ideal use of capital receipts. The government is supposed to use capital receipts for development purposes, like new infrastructure, factories, rail. These kinds of investments create jobs, grow the economy, and help people in the long run. 4. Sometimes happens in reality, especially in India. Sometimes when the government's daily expenses, revenue expenditure, become too high, like salaries, pensions, health, etc., it has to use capital receipts, money meant for big works, to cover these regular costs. This is not ideal, but it happens when there is not enough regular income. 5. Sources of capital receipts in India. In India, capital receipts come from borrowings or loans from the public or other countries, disinvestment, selling part of the government's ownership in public companies like Air India, Elite, savings schemes like National Savings Certificates, Provident Fund, where people invest their money and the government uses it, transfers from other government bodies like RBI or public sector units. In short, capital receipts are big one-time money that the government receives. They are not from regular income and ideally used for development projects. But sometimes the money is used to manage daily expenses when regular income is not enough. Common sources include loans, sales of government assets, and public savings. Let me know if you'd like this in chart form, bullet notes, or as a visual story. All right, let's break this down step by step, word by word, in the easiest and simplest way, just like teaching a young child who has never heard these words before. I'll explain everything with simple examples too. Capital receipts, main types, in super simple language. These are 3 big ways the government gets capital receipts. That means big, one-time money, not regular income. Let's understand each. Loan recovery. What does it mean? Sometimes the government gives loans to others, to states like Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, etc., to UT, Puducherry, to public companies like Air India, LI, even to foreign countries. What happens later? After some time, these people or groups pay back the money. When the money comes back to the government, it is called loan recovery. This returned money is a capital receipt because it is not income. It's just the return of earlier given money. Example, if I give my friend 100 and he gives it back after 1 year, that's loan recovery for me. But if he also gives me 10 extra as interest, that 10 is my income, called revenue receipt. So, original money coming back equals capital receipt. Extra interest money equals revenue receipt. Borrowings by the government. What does it mean? Sometimes the government needs more money than it has, so it borrows money like we take loans. 2 types. 1, internal borrowing, loans from inside India, from RBI, India's central bank, from Indian banks like SBI, from Indian companies or institutions like LIC. 2, external borrowing, loans from India, from World Bank, IMF, from foreign countries like USA, Japan, from foreign financial institutions. Example, think of the government like a person who asks for money from friends, inside or outside the country, and promises to pay back later with interest. This borrowed money is a capital receipt because it's a loan, not income. Other receipts by the government. These are other ways the government collects capital, loan type money. How does it happen? People give their money to the government, or some examples, Provident Fund, PF, savings of employees for retirement. Postal deposits, savings people put in the post office. Small savings schemes, SSS, like Indira Vikas Patra, Kisan Vikas Patra, National Savings Certificate, government bonds. People buy them to get interest later. What is common in all of these? The government takes people's money now and promises to return it later with interest. So this is also a kind of loan the government takes from the public. Example, you give 1,000 to the government as savings. After 5 years, they give you 1,500 back. So it's a loan, and the government uses this money in the meantime. Final summary, all three in one line. Type what it means. Example. Borrowings. Government takes loans from World Bank or RBI. Money given before, now coming back. State repays loan from central government. Our borrowings. Government takes loans from India or a loan bank or RBI. Other receipts. People give savings to gov schemes like PF bonds. You buy Kisan Vikas Patra, Gov returns money later. Let me know if you want this as a table, flashcards, or a visual diagram. I'll make it as fun and easy as possible. Alright, let me explain capital expenditure to you in the most simple way, like I'm teaching a child with no idea about money or government. I'll break it line by line, word by word with easy examples. This will be super clear and very easy to understand. What is capital expenditure? First, imagine. The government is like a big house owner. It earns money and spends money. It spends money on two big types of things. One, daily needs, like salaries, electricity bills, office rent. This is revenue expenditure. Two, big things, like building schools, buying tanks for the army, giving loans to others. This is capital expenditure. So, what is capital expenditure? Capital expenditure equals money spent by the government on big long-term things that help in development, like making roads, power plants, railways, give benefits for many years, include loans given to repaying loans, buying machines, building big things, etc. Let's learn the 5 major types of capital expenditure one by one in easy words. Hat 1. Loan dispersals by the government. What does that mean? Loan dispersal means giving loans. The government gives money as a loan to Indian states like Bihar or Karnataka, Union territories like Delhi or J&K, government companies like BSNL, Indian Railways, foreign countries like Nepal, Sri Lanka, international organizations like World Bank, IMF. Example, the government gives 1,000 crore to Bihar to build highways. That's capital expenditure. It is not money spent forever. It's a loan, and the government will get it back later. 2. Loan repayments by the government. What does that mean? Sometimes the government itself takes loans from others. Later, it has to return that loan. This returning of loan is called loan repayment. The government may repay Indian banks like SBI, foreign banks like Deutsche Bank, World Bank, IMFs like Japan or USA. Only the actual loan amount, not the interest, part of capital expenditure. India had borrowed 5,000 crore from World Bank. Now it is paying that back. That payment is capital expenditure. But the interest paid on this loan is revenue expenditure. Planned expenditure of the government. What does this mean? Planned expenditure means money used for planned development of India, building new roads, dams, airports, hospitals. It also includes money the central government gives to states to help them with their development plans. Example, the central government gives 2,000 crore to Tamil Nadu to build solar power plants. That is capital expenditure. Short for capital expenditures on defense. What does this mean? The government spends money on the defense forces, Army, Navy, Air Force. There are 2 types of defense spending. Capital defense expenditure, buying new weapons, missiles, fighter jets, tanks, upgrading technology. Revenue defense expenditure, paying salaries of soldiers, food, uniforms, daily needs. Only the big purchases and modernization are called capital expenditure. Example, if the government buys 36 Rafale jets, that's capital expenditure. If it pays soldiers' salaries, that's revenue expenditure. Lot 5, General Services. What does this mean? The government also spends money to improve services for the public, like railways, postal services, water supply, education, development villages. All the money spent on building or improving these services, like new railway tracks, new schools, new post offices, is capital expenditure. Example: if the government builds a new water pipeline system in a village, that's capital expenditure. In short, capital expenditure is government's big spending on type what it means. Example, this loan dispersal. Paying 500 crore back to World Bank. Loan dispersal. Gov gives loans to states, PSUs, other countries. 1,000 crore loan to Nepal. Loan repayment. Gov repays its own loans, paying 500 crore back to World Bank. Plan expenditure. Gov spends on development, building highways, power plants. Capital defense spending, buying defense machines and tools, buying missiles, tanks, submarines. General services, spending building and improving public services, new railway lines, new post offices, school buildings. Would you like a mind map, diagram, or a summary sheet to help you revise this quickly? I can make it for you. All right, let me explain this in the most simple way, step by step, word by word, just like teaching a small child who has no knowledge of economics. Let's make it super clear like the best teacher in the world. Topic: capital deficit. 1. What does the term mean? Let's break the words. Capital, big money needed to build or invest in big things, like roads, schools, hospitals. Deficit, not enough of something, a shortage. So, capital deficit means the government does not have enough big money, capital, to spend on big useful things. 2. Capital deficit a real term in economics? No. It's not an official term in economics books. But in news and real life, people often use similar words like capital crunch, lack of funds, scarcity of capital. These phrases mean not enough money for big development. 3. Why does this happen? Let's imagine a simple story example. You want to build a treehouse. You need wood, nails, paint, tools, which all cost money, but you only have half the money you need. This is called a capital crunch or capital deficit. Now think of the government in the same way. It wants to build highways, schools, dams, defense equipment, railways, but it doesn't have enough capital money. So it faces a capital shortage, a capital deficit. What kind of spending needs capital? Government spends money in two main ways. Type of spending, meaning, example, a capital. Revenue spending, small daily needs, paying salaries, electricity bills. Big things that help country grow, building roads, bridges, hospitals. Capital deficit usually affects capital spending, which is very important for growth. 5. Who mostly faces this problem? Countries that are still developing, like India, Nepal, Bangladesh, face this problem more often. Why? Because they need a lot of development. They don't have enough money. They spend more than they earn, so they have to borrow money or cut some spending. 6. So what would capital deficit mean if it were a real term? Even though economics books don't use it, if we use the word, it would mean the government does not have enough capital money to do the big spending it wants, like building, developing, investing in the future. 7. How does it affect real life? Fewer new roads or schools get built. Big development projects get delayed. People may lose jobs. Economy grows slower. 8. How can the government fix a capital deficit? How the government can: 1. Take loans from inside or outside the country. 2. Sell government bonds, like borrowing from people. 3. Collect more taxes. 4. Cut other spending. 5. Privatize, sell its shares in government companies. And 9. Quick summary, key point, meaning, capital. Big money for building and developing. Deficit, not enough. Capital deficit, unofficial. Government doesn't have enough big money to spend on big projects. Mostly seen in developing countries, results in slower development, project delays. Easy analogy to remember. Imagine you want to buy a bicycle that costs $5,000. You only have $2,000. You're short of $3,000. That is your bicycle money deficit. Just like that, if the government wants to build highways, bridges, and more, but doesn't have enough money, that's a capital deficit. Would you like a real-world example, diagram, or a quick quiz to test what you've learned? I can make it super fun and simple. Here is a detailed summary of the topic fiscal deficit in the simplest words. 1. What is fiscal deficit? Fiscal deficit means the government is spending more money than it is getting. It shows a shortage in the government's budget. It tells us how much extra money the government needs to borrow to meet its total spending. 2. Formula of fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit equals total expenditure, total receipts. Note, receipts include both income and loans. 3. What are government receipts? Money government gets from taxes like income tax, GST, profits from public companies, fees and charges, borrowings, loans, not income but still money received. 4. What are money government spends on salaries, pensions, schools, hospitals, roads, defense, welfare programs, loan repayments. 5. Important points. Fiscal deficit shows that the government is spending beyond its means. It does not mean only income versus spending, but includes borrowings too. It can be shown in like 10 lakh crore, 10% of GDP, like 6.5% of India's GDP. Why does fiscal deficit happen? Because the government has low income from taxes, has to spend a lot on development and welfare, faces emergencies like war, pandemic, disaster, needs to build roads, railways, bridges, etc. Capital spending. Is fiscal deficit good or bad? Good, create jobs and boost economy. Used for building assets like roads, used for unproductive expenses, used during economic slowdown, leads to heavy borrowing and more debt, helps create jobs and boost economy, causes inflation, things become expensive. 8. Since when is it used in India? The term fiscal deficit has been officially used in India since 1997 to 98. 9. Why is it important? It's sure unhealthy the government's finances are. Investors, economists, and global agencies like IMF, World Bank use it to judge how well a country is managing its money. 10. Real-life example, simple. If the government earns 100 crore but spends 150 crore, the fiscal deficit is 50 crore. This 50 crore must be borrowed or arranged somehow. Let me know if you'd like a visual chart, memory trick, or MCQ question based on this. Let me explain this step by step, word by word, in the most simple and clear way, as if I'm teaching a small child with no background in economics. Let's start with the idea of fiscal deficit again, quickly. Fiscal deficit means government is spending more money than it is getting, so it borrows the extra money it needs. Now let's understand the paragraph you gave in super simple language. Line 1. Fiscal deficit of the governments, center and states has been rising continuously due to diverse socio-economic reasons. Simple meaning. Both central government and state governments in India are spending more than they earn. This gap, deficit, has been getting bigger every year. Why? Because of many social and economic reasons. Examples of such reasons: giving free food to the poor, building roads, hospitals, schools, paying salaries and pensions, handling disasters like floods or COVID. Line 2. The issue has been hotly debated during the period of economic reforms, which will be discussed under a separate title on forthcoming pages. Simple meaning. This topic, fiscal deficit, became very important and controversial when India started changing its economy in the 1990s. These changes are called economic reforms. People debated, should government spend less? Should it borrow more or cut expenses? We will talk about these reforms later. 3. After the Fiscal Responsibility Law was enacted in 2003, we find a concerted effort, fiscal consolidation from the government to contain it. Simple meaning. In 2003, a new law was made. Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management FRBM Act. This law told the government, you must control your spending and reduce borrowing. After this law, the government tried hard to resist it. It's called fiscal consolidation. Consolidation just means reducing the gap slowly. Line 4. For the year 2020-21, the Union Budget 2020-21 has set a fiscal deficit target of 3.5% of the GDP, which was estimated to remain at 3.8% for 2019-20. Simple meaning, the government said in its 2020-21 budget, we will try to keep fiscal deficit at 3.5% of the total income of the country, GDP. In the previous year, 2019-20, the deficit was 3.8% of GDP. So they plan to reduce it a little. Line 5. Fiscal deficit of the center has been continuously falling since 2009-10, when it was at 6.6%. Simple meaning. In 2009-10, the central government had a very high fiscal deficit, 6.6% of GDP. Since then, the government has been trying to bring it down every year. Extra simple example for full understanding. Imagine a boy named Raju. He earns hundreds per month from his chores, but he spends 130s every month. So he has a deficit of 30. He borrows this from his friend. Now if he decides, I will cut my spending and reduce borrowing, that is fiscal consolidation. If he succeeds and now spends only 105, his deficit is just 5. That's progress. In short, super summary. Fiscal deficit means government is spending more than its income, rising for many years. In 2003, a law was passed to control this problem. Government is trying to reduce the deficit little by little. In 2009-10, the deficit was very high, 6.6% of GDP. In 2019-20, it came down to 3.8%, and the goal for 2020-21 was 3.5%. Would you like a diagram, MCQs, or a story to help you remember it even better? Sure. Let's explain primary deficit again in even more detail and in the simplest, easiest way possible, as if you're learning this for the very first time. What is primary deficit? Let's go step by step like a kind teacher. 1. First, understand what is fiscal deficit. Imagine the government earns 100, but it spends 120. That means it is spending 20 more than it earns. This extra 20 shit is called fiscal deficit. So, fiscal deficit equals government's total spending, government's total earnings. But wait, the government also has to pay interest on the money it borrowed in the past. Let's learn about that next. 2. What is interest payment? Just like when we take a loan from a bank, we have to pay interest every month. The government also takes loans, and it has to pay interest on those loans every year. This interest is not for buying anything new. It's just paying for old loans. So out of the 20 fiscal deficit, 15 might be interest on old loans. The remaining 5 is new overspending this year. 3. What is primary deficit? Now comes the most important point. Primary deficit equals fiscal deficit, interest payments. So in our example, fiscal deficit equals 20, interest payments equal 15. So primary deficit equals 20 to 15 equal 5. This 5 is the real amount the government needs to borrow this year, not to pay old loans, but because it is spending more than earned. 4. Why is primary deficit shows how much is the government overspending this year? Ignoring old loans. Is the government being careless with money or not? If fiscal deficit is going down, is it because government is spending less, or just because interest payments are smaller now? So it helps us understand the real reason behind the government's money situation. 5. Using this term, started using the term primary deficit in the budget from the year 1997 to 98. It's now a regular part of budget calculations. 6. In what form is primary deficit shown? It is shown in two ways. 1. As a number, for example, 1 to 1,000 crore. 2. As a percent of GDP, for example, 0.5% of India's total income. Both ways help experts understand how serious the situation is. #7. Super easy example. Let's say a kid named Amit gets 500 pocket money, but he spends 600. So he borrows 100. That 100 is like a fiscal deficit. Now suppose, out of 100, 80 is just interest on his older borrowings. So he actually overspent 20 as this month. That 20 is the primary. 8. Super simple definition. Primary deficit is the amount of money the government is short after removing interest payments from the total deficit. It shows the real, fresh overspending of this year. 9. Final summary, like a child's notebook. Fiscal deficit. Total extra money needed. Interest. Payment for old loans. Primary deficit equals fiscal deficit interest. Shows how much the government really overspent this year. Helps in knowing if money is managed well. India started using it in 1990. Helps bring clarity and truth in budget. Would you like me to make this into a chart, story, or diagram to help you remember it even better? All right, let's now learn about primary surplus in the most simple and easy way, word by word, line by line, as if I'm explaining to a child with no background in economics. I'll also use very easy examples and add helpful ideas to make everything crystal clear. What is primary surplus? Let's break it down into small, easy steps. 1. First, remember what is primary deficit. We already learned. Primary deficit equals fiscal deficit, interest payments. Now, let's flip the situation. #2. What is primary surplus? When the government earns more money than it spends, excluding interest on old loans, we say primary surplus. So in very simple words, primary surplus equals government's total tax money, government's total spending without interest. 3. Even simpler meaning. Imagine this. The government earns 100 from taxes. It spends 90s, not including interest on old loans. So it has 10 extra left. This extra 10 is the primary surplus. 4. Important point. In primary surplus, we ignore interest payments. Why? Because interest is for old loans. We only want to check, is the government doing well this year? We are trying to see, is the government spending less than it earns right now? Why is primary surplus important? Primary surplus helps us know if the government is managing money wisely, if the government would have had a budget surplus, extra money, if there were no interest payments, how much extra money is available for new things like schools, roads, railways, hospitals, called fiscal space. When did India began using this idea from the 1997 to 98 budget? Since then, it helps us measure the health of our economy. 7. What else can primary surplus tell us? It gives clues about tax base. Are enough people or businesses paying taxes? Debt to GDP ratio. How big are loans compared to the size of the economy? Tax compliance. Are people paying taxes honestly? Revenue. Where is the money going? Projects. 8. Super simple example. Let's say you get 500s as pocket money. This is like the government's tax money. You spend only 400s on new books, snacks, etc. This is government spending, not including any old dues. You didn't touch the money kept aside to pay old loans. So you saved 100. That 100 is your primary surplus. 9. What if there was no interest to pay? If the government had no old loans, it could use the entire primary surplus for new development, new schools, better roads, healthcare, public transport, or even give relief to people. That's why knowing primary surplus is important. And final easy definition. Primary surplus means the government earned more than it spent if we do not count old loan interest payments. It shows the real financial strength of the government. 11. Summary table, like a kid's notebook. Term, what it means, primary surplus, tax receipts, money government earns from taxes, Expenditure, money government spends like on roads, hospitals, etc. Interest payments, money paid on old loans, primary surplus. Tax money, government spending, not including interest, what it shows. Real extra money, if Gov is financially strong this year. Would you like this as a short story, diagram, quiz, or memory trick to help you remember even better? Absolutely. Let's now explain monetized deficit in even greater detail, in the simplest way possible, word by word, line by line, just like you're a child learning it for the first time. Let's start with the basics. What does the word deficit mean? Deficit means, I don't have enough money. Let's say you want to buy a toy for 100, but you have only 60. You are short of 40. That missing 40 is your deficit. Now, what is fiscal deficit? Fiscal means government's money. So fiscal deficit means the government is spending more money than it earns. Let's say government earns 10,000 crore from taxes, etc. Government wants to spend 12,000 crore. That means government is short of 2,000 crore. That 2,000 crore is fiscal deficit. Nast upon this. Now comes the big word, monetized deficit. Let's break it down. Monetized means turned into money. Deficit means not enough money. So monetized deficit means the money that the RBI gives directly to the government to cover its shortage. Let's understand with a story. Imagine the government, the RBI is like a big bank. Let's say your mom. The government wants to spend more, pay workers, fix roads, but he doesn't have enough money. So he goes to RBI and says, I need help. Can you give me some money? RBI says, okay, I'll give you the money. In return, the government gives a promise paper called a treasury bill or a GSEC. These are like, I'll pay you back later slips. This money given by RBI is called monetized deficit. What are treasury bills and GSECs? Very simply, treasury bill, T-bill, short-term paper, government promises to return money in a few months. GSEC, government security, long-term paper, government promises to return money in a few years. Why did RBI do this? Earlier, before 1997, RBI was forced to give money to the government. Every time the government wanted to borrow, RBI had to buy those treasury bills. So monetized deficit was very common. What changed after 1997 and 2003? 1. In 1997, RBI and government agreed. Let's stop this. RBI won't be forced to buy anymore. 2. In 2003, a new law came. FRBM Act, Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management. This law said government should reduce its borrowing. Government should not depend on RBI for money. What's happening now? Now, RBI is not forced to give money to the government. But sometimes, to manage the economy, called open market operations or OMOs, RBI still buys some government papers. So monetized deficit still exists, but in a voluntary way. An easy example. Let's say, 1. You want to buy a school bag for 500. 2. You have only 300s. 3. You give a paper to your friend. I'll give you 200 later. 4. Your friend gives you 200. This 200 your friend gave you is like monetized deficit if your friend was forced to help. Now imagine, your friend is not forced but still helps. That's like RBI today, not forced but still sometimes helps. How much is this monetized deficit now? Let's take a real number. In 2020-21, the government planned to borrow 5.36 lakh crore. Earlier year, 29-20, it was 4.99 lakh crore. Most of this money comes from the market. People, banks, companies buy government bonds, but a small part may still be bought by RBI. So RBI still gives some money, though not like before. Why does this matter? Because if RBI prints too much money, it can cause inflation. Things become more expensive. It also affects the RBI's job of managing the economy. So less monetized deficit, good control of money. Summary table for kids. Term, meaning payback expensive. Fiscal deficit, government spends more than it earns. Monetized deficit, RBI gives money to the government, by buying its I will pay back slips. Treasury bills, short-term government borrow slips. Long-term government borrow slips. Before 1997, RBI was forced to buy them. After 1997, RBI is not forced. Their 2003 law, government told to stop depending on RBI. Now RBI buys sometimes voluntarily to help manage the economy. If you want, I can also explain what is open market operations. What happens when RBI prints too much money? Memory tricks to remember this forever? Just let me know. All right, let's explain deficit financing to you in the most simple, step-by-step, word-by-word way, as if you're a child who has never heard the term before. First, what does the word deficit mean? Deficit, I don't have enough money. Let's say a toy for 100, but you have only 60. You are short of 40. That 40 is your deficit, the money you don't have. Now, what does financing mean? Financing means finding a way to get the money. So, deficit financing, finding money to fill the gap, deficit. Now let's put it all together. What is deficit financing? When the government knows that it will spend more money than it will earn and still makes a plan to get that extra money, it is called deficit financing. Let's understand with a simple example. Imagine you are the government. You earn 100s in taxes from people, but you want to spend 150 on roads, schools, hospitals. You are short by 50. That 50 is your deficit. Now you ask, how can I get this extra 50? Here comes deficit financing. You borrow 50 from someone, or you ask the RBI to print 50, or you sell bonds to people and get 50. This act of getting that extra money is called deficit financing. Why does the government do it? Because the government wants to build roads, schools, and help people, wants the economy to grow, believes spending now is important even if it doesn't have enough money now. Where did the term come from? It was first used in the 1930s in the USA. At that time, the world had a big economic problem, Great Depression. The USA government said, let's spend more to help people and fix the economy, even if we don't have all that spending was done using. Is it used only by governments? No, even companies use this idea. Let's say a company is not making profit, but it wants to keep running and growing, so it spends more than it earns. It borrows or gets money from investors. That is also called deficit financing. What about sick firms? A sick firm is a company that is not making any profit, is in loss, called in the red. This firm may spend more money to fix itself, buy machines, hire experts, take loans to survive. This is also a kind of deficit financing. So in very simple words, deficit financing means spending more than what you earn and finding a way to get that extra money. Why is this important? Because sometimes spending more helps the economy grow faster. But if a government keeps spending too much without earning more, inflation, prices rise too fast, debt, too many loans, trouble in the future. Quick summary table. Term what it means in simple words without earning. Deficit. Spending is more than income. Financing. Finding a way to get money. Deficit financing. Getting extra money to cover the shortage. Is it? Governments, companies, sick firms. In the 1930s, USA. Why use it? To grow, fix problems, survive in tough times. Would you like me to show how deficit financing can cause inflation? Draw a cute picture or cartoon-style example? Give a fun memory trick to never forget this? Let me know. Of course. Let me now explain means of deficit financing in the simplest, easiest step-by-step way, like you're a curious kid learning for the first time. I'll explain word by word with simple examples and clear meanings. First, remember, what is deficit financing? When the government spends more money than it earns and then finds ways to get the extra money, That is called deficit financing. Now the big question is, how does the government get this extra money? These ways or methods are called the means of deficit financing. Let's understand it slowly, one part at a time. 1. What are means of deficit financing? The word means simply means ways or methods. So, means of deficit financing equals ways to get money when the government has a budget shortage. These are the tools a government uses to fill the gap between income and spending. Main means of deficit financing, in order of preference from best to less good. I external aids, the best option. Let's explain this with a story. Imagine you're a kid and you want a bicycle. You need 5,000, but you only have 3,000. You ask your uncle who lives abroad for help. He gives you 2,000 without asking for anything back or with a very small interest. That's like external aid. In government terms, external aid means money that comes from other countries or world organizations, like the World Bank or IMF. Sometimes it's a loan with low interest, called a soft loan. Sometimes it's free help, called a grant. This is the most preferred and best way to finance a deficit. Why? Because it's cheap or even free. It doesn't put too much pressure on the country's economy. Example from India, 1991 financial crisis. Let's look at a real example. In 1990-91, India had a big money problem. The IMF, International Monetary Fund, gave India soft loans to help. But the IMF said, India, try to keep your fiscal deficit money shortage to 4.5% of your GDP. That means for every 100 that India's economy produced, it could only borrow 4.5. Why 4.5%? Because India was getting external aid. That made it easy to manage this level of borrowing. It didn't create a big risk. Another example, year 2002. In 2002, India's deficit was 5.7% of GDP, which is more than 4.5%. But IMF still said, that's okay. Why okay? Because 1, India was controlling its deficit better. 2, India had good forex, foreign exchange reserves, enough dollars and euros in the bank. This protected India from bad effects of high deficit. It's like having savings to back up your loan. Why is this important to know? Because every country needs to know how much borrowing is safe. It depends on how you are getting the extra money. If you're getting good quality money, like soft loans or grants, you can borrow a bit more safely. In simple words, term, what it means in simple words. 1. Deficit financing, when government spends more than it earns and finds extra money. Means of deficit financing, ways to get that extra money. External aid, money from other countries or world banks, free or low interest. Keep deficit near 4.5% of GDP if aid is coming. Forex reserves, like savings in dollars, helps protect when deficit is high. And imagine you're a country, you have a problem, you need 1,000, you only have 600. You ask your friend World Bank for 400. If he gives it free, that's perfect. If he gives it with a little interest, still good. You are doing deficit financing using external aid. Quick points to remember. Best way to manage a deficit equals external aid. Soft loans equals easy, cheap loans with small interest. Grants, free money, no need to repay. Countries with good forex reserves can handle a bit more deficit. Always better if you don't rely too much on loans with high interest. Would you like me to now explain the other means of deficit financing, like printing money, borrowing from the market, etc., in the same way? Let me know. I'll break them down too, step by step, like a friendly teacher. Absolutely. I'll explain this in the most simple, word-by-word, step-by-step way, as if you're a smart kid with zero background knowledge but full of curiosity. Let's break this paragraph down line by line in easy words with clear, meaningful examples. Original grants are even better, which comes free, neither interest nor any repayment. Simple explanation. External grants equals free money given to a country by other countries or big world organizations, like UN, USA, UK, World Bank, etc. It is called a grant because you don't have to pay any interest, you don't have to back at all. Imagine your school gives you 1,000 as a prize. They don't ask for it back. The extra. That's a grant, free money. But it either did not come to India since 1970 first Pokhran testings. Simple explanation. 1975, India tested its first nuclear at a place called Pokhran in Rajasthan. After that, many rich countries got angry or worried, so they stopped giving free money, grants to India. That's why India did not receive many grants after that year. Simple story. Imagine you win a prize, but then you do something that others don't like. They say, we won't give you more prizes now. That's what happened to India after 1970. Or India did not accept it, as happened post-tsunami, arguing grants aids coming with a tag condition. Simple explanation. Sometimes other countries offered grants to help India, like during the tsunami in 2004. But India said no. Why? Because those grants came with conditions or tags. That means, we'll give you money, but you must do this or allow us to do that. India didn't want to be told what to do, even in a tough time. Example. Imagine a friend says, I'll give you 500, but only if you let me decide how you spend it. You might say, no thanks, I want freedom. That's what India did. Last line. That is why here, this segment has not been discussed as a means to manage deficit. Simple explanation. Because grants were either not given to India or used them. That's why this way of getting money, external grants, is not included in the main discussion of how India manages budget deficit. Summary in super simple words. Thing, what happened, deficit. External granting from other countries, no payback. 1975 Pokhran test. India tested nuclear bomb. Countries stop aid. 2004 tsunami help. Some grants were offered, but India refused them. Why refused? Because grants had conditions, do this, do that. Result, India mostly didn't use external grants. Imagine this, a kid story version. You're a student. Sometimes your school or a rich uncle gives you money for free, like a grant. But one day you do something bold, like throw a big firecracker in school. Now they stop giving you gifts. Later, someone offers money again, but says, only if you let me control your choices. You say, no, I want to decide for myself. That's India's story with external grants. One line super simple summary. Grants are free money, but India didn't get them much after 1975, or didn't take them later because they came with strings attached. Would you like me to now explain the next method of deficit financing, like borrowing from the market or printing money, in the same easy style? Just say the word. Absolutely. I'm going to teach this like you're a super curious kid who wants to understand everything, even with no background knowledge at all. I'll explain line by line in the easiest, clearest, and simplest way possible with examples and fun analogies so you never forget it. Original line 1. External borrowings are the next best way to manage fiscal deficit with the condition that the external loans are comparatively cheaper and long-term. What it really means in super simple words, external borrowings equals when the government borrows money from other countries or big world organizations like the World Bank, IMF, or rich countries like USA, Japan, etc. These are like loans, but from outside India, foreign. They help when the government is short of money. This is called a fiscal deficit, when spending is more than earnings. But these loans are only good when the interest is low, cheap to repay. They give you a lot of time to repay, long term. Example. You want to buy a bicycle, but you don't have enough money. If a rich uncle from abroad says, I'll give you the money, you can pay me back in 5 years. I won't charge much interest. That's a good deal, just like external borrowing. Original line 2. Though external loans are considered an erosion in the nation's sovereign decision-making process. Simple meaning, Some people worry that if a country borrows too much from outsiders, then the country might lose some freedom in making its own decisions. The lenders, those who gave money, might say, "You must follow our rules or do what we say because you owe us." This is called a loss of sovereignty, which means losing some control over your own country's decisions. Original line 3. This has its own benefit and is considered better than the internal borrowings due to two reasons. Simple meaning. Even though borrowing from other countries might affect freedom a little, it still has some big benefits. It can actually be better than borrowing from inside India, called internal borrowing. Let's see two simple reasons why. A. First reason. External borrowing brings in foreign currency, hard currency, which gives extra edge to the government spending, as by this the government may fulfill its developmental requirements inside the country as well as from outside the country. Super simple version. When India borrows from outside, it gets foreign money, like US dollars, euros, etc. This foreign money is also called hard currency. This is very useful because India can use this money to buy things from other countries, like machines, oil, tech. It can also use it to build things inside the country, like roads, schools, factories. Example, let's say you borrow US dollars from your cousin in America. You can buy a bicycle made in Germany, or use it to buy parts and make a bicycle in India. So foreign money, more choices, more power. Second reason. It is preferred over the internal borrowings due to crowding out effect. If the government itself goes on borrowing from the banks of the country, from where will others borrow for investment purposes? Super simple version. If the government borrows money from India's own, there is less money left for businesses, startups, or people to borrow. This problem is called the crowding out effect. Example, imagine there's only 1,000 in your school's money box. The school principal takes 900 for a new building. Now only 100 is left. So if students want to borrow for projects, there's hardly anything left. That's crowding out. When the government takes most of the money and out. A super simple summary. Borrowing from outside the country brings in helpful foreign money and avoids taking too much from Indian banks. So it's often better than borrowing from inside India, as long as the loan is cheap and not too controlling. Even simpler story version, kid style. Imagine India is a student. India wants to buy books, a laptop, and school supplies, but doesn't have enough pocket money. So, option 1, borrow from the school library, India's own banks. But if India takes all the money, what about other students? That's a problem, crowding out. Option 2, borrow from a foreign cousin who gives money in dollars for low interest and says, take your time to return it. Now India can buy cool tools from other countries or use the money at home, and other students can still borrow from the library. So borrowing from abroad is a smart choice, but only if it's not bossy or too expensive. Would you like me to explain the next method of deficit financing in this same way? Just say yes, and I'm ready. Absolutely. Let's break this down word by word, line by line, as if I'm teaching a young kid who has zero knowledge of economics. I'll make this as clear and simple as possible with examples. Let's go. Original line. The government proposed in the Union Budget 2019-20 to raise part of its borrowings from the external markets. Simple meaning. In the 2019-20 budget, the Indian government had an idea. It said, let's borrow some money not from inside India, but from outside India, from the world market. What does external market mean? It means foreign countries, foreign investors, or big global banks. Why borrow money at all? Because the government needs money. Schools, hospitals run the country, but sometimes it doesn't have enough, so it borrows. It means the government was in favor of issuing sovereign bond, a proposal put forth. Simple meaning. The government said, let's issue a sovereign bond to borrow money. What is a sovereign bond? Let's break it word by word. Sovereign equals something related to a country or government. Bond, a promise to repay borrowed money after some time with interest. A sovereign bond when the government of India says to foreign investors, lend us your money now. We promise to return it after 5 or 10 years with some extra interest. Example, it's like you give your uncle 100 today and he gives you back 110 after a year. That's a bond. Country does this. It's called a sovereign bond. Original line. Such an initiative of the government might be based on the fact that the sovereign external debt of India is at quite comfortable level, 5% of the GDP. Simple meaning, India's current loans from outside the country, called sovereign external debt, are very low. They are only 5% of India's total income, GDP, gross domestic product, all the money India makes in a year. That's a safe amount. It's not too much. So, the government thought, since we don't owe a lot to other countries yet, it's okay if we borrow a little more now. Original line. Though, till April 2020, no such action was taken by the government in the direction. Union Budget 2020 to 21 also remained muted on the proposal. Simple meaning, even though the idea was proposed in 2019, by April 2020, the government hadn't actually done it. Even in the next year's budget, 2020 to 21, the government didn't talk much about this plan. So the idea was still just an idea, not real action yet. Original line. There has been heated debate among economists on the pros and cons of such a move. Simple meaning, many economists, money experts started to argue. Some said this is a good idea. Others said this might be dangerous. They were discussing the good and bad sides of borrowing money this way. In the easiest summary, 1. In 2019, the Indian government had a new idea. Let's borrow money from the world by selling something called sovereign bonds. 2. These are like a promise. We'll pay you back with interest after a few years. 3. The government thought it's okay to do this because India's debt, money owed to other countries, was low. It was just 5% of India's total income. 4. But later, the plan was not followed. Nothing actually happened until April 2020. 5. Economists started debating. Some said it's safe and smart. Some said it's risky and might cause problems. Super simple kid-style story. Imagine India is a teenager. India needs money to build a big project like a school. India usually asks parents or friends, people in India, for money. But this time, India says, maybe I'll ask foreigners, like rich uncles in other countries, to lend me money. India promises, don't worry, I'll give your money back in 5 years with extra. Right now, India doesn't owe much money to anyone, so it feels safe to ask. But in the end, India doesn't ask yet, just thinks about it. Meanwhile, some grown-ups start arguing. It's a smart plan. No, it's risky. What if we lose control? Would you like me to explain the pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages of sovereign bonds next, in this same simple style? Just say yes!